Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining our webinar today. I'm going to give everybody just one more minute here. It looks like it's about 1:01 to give plenty of time to sign in. While that's going on, give a couple of housekeeping notes. First off, after the webinar, as usual, we will send out the slides and a video of the webinar, so you can don't have to worry about too much about taking notes or things like that. We'll get that information out to you. Secondly, at the end, we do hope to keep this webinar to about no longer than 45 minutes, but at the end, we are going to make sure that we try to reserve some time to answer some questions. So throughout the webinar, if you have questions, feel free just to look over on the GoToWebinar control panel. You'll see a questions tab, click on that, and just put your questions in along the way. And I have a couple folks on my team monitoring, and they're going to send me the best questions that come through, and then we'll make sure after the fact that we take the time, try to get everyone's questions answered for you. So now it's 1:02. Let's go ahead and get kicked off. So my name is Bradley Martin. I lead the sales and marketing teams here at Kindful, and I'm really excited today to talk to everyone about optimizing your donor lifecycle. So the way this webinar came about, we launched about a 27-page ebook. Maybe some of you have downloaded it just a few weeks ago. We've had great response and a lot of interest in it. And we felt like it was a great topic to go ahead and try to do a live webinar around, specifically giving people a chance at the end to ask some questions. And so we're going to dive right in here and get started. So let's start off by just discussing what is the donor life cycle. And so the donor life cycle, as we define it, is the levels of engagement your donors or supporters go through as they deepen their relationship with your nonprofit. And really, there's three major stages. Any donor life cycle is going to have sub-stages under these, but three major stages that we believe every nonprofit should be paying attention to ensure that they are building the most holistic and healthy donor life cycle. Number one, that is acquisition. Two, retention. And three, upgrades. Now, one of the things we'll hear from a lot of pundits out there in the nonprofit world is that retention is king, and retention is the thing that you should pay most attention to. And I don't disagree with that. I think retention is very, very important. But to build the most holistic and healthy donor life cycle, we would recommend that it's not just about retention, it's also about making sure you understand how many new donors and contacts you're adding to your database and that you're building relationships with. And then also on an ongoing basis, how are you upgrading, said differently, how are you building deeper relationships with your donors so that they will give more to your organization over time. And so I wanted to start off really quickly with a quick poll. This is the first time we've tried this, and so hopefully everything works okay. But what I wanted to do here was to help everyone get a little bit of a sense of where people stand in comparison to where you are. So the question is, how confident are you that you're tracking all three stages of the donor life cycle? You can see the answers here. I'm 100% confident. I'm a donor lifecycle ninja. We're tracking, but there's work to do still. I'm only tracking one or two parts of the donor life cycle, or I'm not tracking it at all. We need help. So I'm going to launch a poll. You should see a screen pop up here. So there you go. You should be able to answer. So go ahead and put those answers in. We'll keep it up for just a few more seconds. Looks like we've had about 50% of people. Maybe 5 more seconds here. Then I'm going to close the poll. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and close it now. Thanks everyone for responding. And we'll see the results here pop up, right? So wow, so only 2% say they're 100% confident that they are a donor lifecycle ninja, which I guess if you're coming to the donor lifecycle webinar, that makes sense. And a lot of people over right at 50% are tracking some parts, but feel like they could still use some help. It seems like getting things, tracking all parts of the donor lifecycle. So this is great information. Thank you so much for responding to that. And when we send out this slide with the results, we'll update those results right down through the numbers so everyone can refer back to that. So let's continue talking through the donor life cycle and what it is and what it isn't. And so this representation is a more traditional view of the donor life cycle. I want to be clear here that this isn't necessarily the way Kindful and we believe you should be thinking about your donor management. But this is what you would often see if you went and just Googled donor life cycle. You would see a more of a circular motion. And sometimes that appears that it is just recycling your donors each year. Sometimes that is that it's just, moving someone around to an ultimate giving stage. And I think the thing that we would suggest is the why it's not important, why it's not good to look at it this way is mainly because you don't really want to recycle your donors, right? You want to make sure you're sending your donors the right message at the right time. And let me back up for a second. I want to make sure I say that the donor life cycle doesn't just include donors. It includes all your constituents. It includes people who maybe have not actually become a donor yet, that are further up in the life cycle. And so I would be careful to make sure, what this leads me to is to say, be very careful that you are not just sending the same messages year over year, month over month, without making sure you understand where someone is in the process, so that you can relate to them more and send a message and or an appeal that is more compelling. And so how would we suggest that you look at it? So what we would say is that it's more of a linear view, right? It's more of a thing where you have people who go through different stages. And I think the important thing to notice here is that we are taking account that we know people are going to lapse, and they're going to, and really, if this was a little bit of a better representation, this is frankly a little bit oversimplified. You would see that there are multiple places people can lapse or that you can have attrition. And so as you look at this, it's not only having one donor life cycle that's important, it's also understanding that you need to segment your donor life cycle into different types of donors or potential donors. And so you may have just a standard donor life cycle, one that is, once someone gives you a gift, you want to make sure you thank them, you acknowledge them, you start the process of making sure that you retain them year over year, and then ultimately trying to move them to some sort of ultimate goal, which may be a major donor. It may be that you are wanting them to just be a recurring donor, or more of an advocate because they have a very strong network. And so the other thing I would point out is sometimes many nonprofits that we work with have a very large volunteer base. That might mean that they don't actually necessarily give in the way of a monetary donation, but they give their time. And I would say for that, maybe you have a life cycle where someone, once they volunteer once, you want to ask them to get on a more recurring schedule with volunteering. And then maybe the ultimate goal is that not only are they volunteering, but they are inviting other folks to volunteer and maybe even managing a volunteer schedule. And then lastly, if early in your process, when you're acquiring a donor, you end up in a position where you're doing major, or that you can identify major donors, maybe that's through a well screening process or something like that, you would probably immediately want to put them on their own path, right? I think we all understand, and most organizations do a very good job of, once they identify someone has the means to be a major donor, they do a great job of putting them on a different path and starting to treat them a little bit better or a little bit different, right? And making sure they're communicating in different ways. So moving on, you may say, Bradley, look, this is all great, right? And I understand that we should be tracking all this, but this seems like a lot of work. If I do all this, what should I expect to get out of it? And these are just a couple of the benefits of tracking the donor life cycle. The first is, and I've kind of already hit on some of these things, but the first is the ability to be more targeted in your messaging, yielding a greater ROI. And so again, going back to the idea that you don't want to send the same message to the same person. And imagine, a scenario where maybe you hold a large event each year, and someone attended for the first event last year, but then you have someone who's been to your event 10 years in a row, right? There may be a different type of message you would want to send each of those individuals. You may want to really recognize that it's the 10th year that this person has come, and maybe give them a little bit more of a VIP message, where your message for someone who has only attended the year before might just be a little bit more straightforward, and it might have a different type of offer or appeal in it. You may also, in that same scenario, you may look at what during your special appeal for your event, what was the different donation amounts people gave. You may offer a full table to someone who was a major donor in your last event, or someone who was just an attendee who donated more at the mid-level. You may just invite them to be just an attendee. The second part, this is something I love as being a marketing and salesperson. I think one of the things that's one of the most difficult things to do is finding the right way, the right reason to reach out for someone. What is the why behind a communication or a message? And I think if you're tracking the donor life cycle, then you can do really amazing. It becomes much easier for you to write very compelling reasons why you're reaching out. And I think that's very important, because one of the things we hear from organizations all the time is that, hey, it's great when I get my first donation, but it's the second and third and fourth one that sometimes is the hardest ones to get. It's hard to retain people. It's hard to ask again for another donation. And so again, I think if you're tracking the donor life cycle and you're segmenting very systematically or strategically, you likely will find more compelling reasons on why you're reaching out. And then lastly, if you're communicating better and you're sending more meaningful messaging to individuals and to donors and constituents, you would expect that you're going to get greater trust with your constituents, leading to less attrition. And so what I wanted to be careful of is I wanted to make sure that you guys understand, we don't think that donor management and donor life cycle is easy, right? And what we really realize is it looks more like this, right? And this obviously is a little bit of a fun thing we put together, comparing the donor life cycle to chutes and ladders. But I think it is a really good representation of probably what it really feels like to manage your donors and to try to manage a donor life cycle. And that's where you can see down at the bottom where it says start here, and someone's working their way up. And you may get them to a point to where up around line 6, they become a recurring donor, which I know is great. They're giving every month. But then imagine their credit card expires. And then you have a hard time getting in touch with them. Maybe they moved and you've sent them information. All they need to do is update their credit card information, but you don't hear from them from over a year. Right? And so at that point, you really got to go back down and start thinking about, you can see the purple slide there where they go from recurring back all the way down to engage, where you may need to back up and better engage them and bring them back around to understand the impact your organization is making and why their donation was so important. And so, again, this is just kind of something fun to look at, but I think it probably better represents the real struggle there is in trying to manage a donor life cycle. So now what I want to do is I want to jump quickly into and just give you a little bit more depth into each key stage of the donor life cycle. So let's start off with acquisition. So how we define donor acquisition is the act of obtaining new donors or contacts through fundraising and marketing efforts. So again, I want to really stress here that we believe the donor life cycle does not necessarily start with a donation. It starts the first time someone becomes aware of your organization and or becomes a contact that you have in your database, someone that you're building a relationship maybe before they've even ever volunteered or became a donor. And so I wanted to take some time to show everyone some quick stats. We're going to do this with every stage. I'm going to highlight, just for time's sake, to ensure that we get to the questions at the end, I am going to just grab a couple of stats here and go through them. So a couple of the ones that stand out here that are most interesting to me is this on the left, on the bottom, you can see on average 1.2 of website visitors should donate. And so what that really means is if you have a website that for every 100 visitors you have to your website, you should expect just a little over one of them to donate. We pulled all of these from independent industry publications and studies, and that to me was a little surprising. I would expect it to maybe have been just a bit higher, but if you're tracking that and you're doing better, you can know that you're beating the benchmark. I think the other thing that was really fascinating to me is that we all know email is a great strategy, but from a result standpoint, that only 0.04% of people will donate from an email appeal on average. So again, if you're beating that, you're doing a great job. Lastly, around acquisition, I want to make sure I take a little bit of time in saying, what are some things you can do right now, or what's some strategies you can start to think about and implement to ensure that you're doing the most you can with acquisition? So first off, ensure your website has an easy way to both donate and to sign up without donating. So what do I mean by that? Some examples could be that you have an email newsletter. Stay in touch, learn about what we're doing. Maybe in some cases, maybe a downloadable guide or PDF might make sense. And we have a lot of organizations who have people sign petitions. And signing petitions is a great way to understand what people are passionate about and to continue to build a relationship based on that passion. So make sure that not only you're only asked on your website, obviously it should be the most primary one and the one that stands out the most, but you also is to donate, but also that you have some ways for people to sign up if they're not quite ready to donate yet. So second, consider adding all of your constituents to your database, even if they haven't given yet. And so what do I mean by that? We see a lot of people who use a program like Kindful or a software like Kindful, which is a donor management system, and they just keep their donors in there. And I get it. I understand that there's many reasons that you may want to do that, but a software like Kindful tracks a lot of information that you can start to report on, and you can start to segment individuals on that you can start gathering that information prior to someone giving a donation. So although we do refer to most of these things as donor management softwares, you can and maybe even should be tracking people before they become a donor. Lastly, I would say use crowdfunding, peer-to-peer, or advocate strategies to take advantage of your current constituents networks. So this is one of the things I think is, we all know the power of social media. We all know how much things go viral and things like that, and we've seen the numerous cases of how things have gone viral. I wouldn't have an expectation that you're ever going to create a campaign that's going to go incredibly viral, but what you likely do have is people who are very, very passionate about your organization. And if you can just make it easy for them to help you raise funds, they likely will do that, or they may be interested just in sharing the great impact you're making and can just help you get more visibility to new and other donors and constituents. So if you're not using those things, I'd definitely look into them. So second, let's run through retention. So retention, I think, is one that likely everyone knows the most about. It is the thing that is shared the most. It is the way to make the single biggest impact year over year on your donations, is to retain more of your donors. And so what is retention? Donor retention is the act of preventing donors from lapsing in their gift, typically from one year to the next. So a couple key stats here. Again, for time's sake, just going to jump on one of these, and that's the one that probably everybody wants to know the most. What is the average retention rate across the nonprofit industry? And right now, it's around 45%. That was from Philanthropy Today, and that's a great number to understand where you stack up. If you're above that number, then great, you're doing a great job, right? And I think we all need to understand that donor attrition is obviously something that is going to happen in your organization. That's why upgrading and acquiring new donors is so important to have a holistic view. So again, a couple quick strategies. So first off, ensure you're tracking your retention trends not only on a year-over-year basis, but on a rolling 12-month basis. So why is that important? So if you right now ran a live hunt report for 2018 over 2017, what that would show you is that all the constituents or the donors that you have who will appear that they've churned, who gave in the latter part of 2017 because they've yet to give in 2018, if maybe they're a year-end giver instead of a recurring giver. So the benefit of looking on a rolling 12 months is that what you're truly looking at is you're looking at individuals who gave last year but have not given in the last 12 months. And so what that allows you to do is to be able to send a very targeted message to someone saying, hey, you gave around this time last year and haven't given again this year. We'd love to continue to have you support us. And obviously that's the gist of the message. I'm sure that most of you would send a much more compelling message about helping them understand the impact their donation made and your vision for their next donation. And that is number 2, is making sure you're sharing that information when you're asking for another donation. Helping them understand the impact their donation made is incredibly important in retaining donors, is that they understand where their money is going to work and how it's affecting the population you serve. So number 3, when using email, make sure your strategy includes multiple emails instead of just one. And so I would even go further to say that it's not only with email that you should be doing this, but if you especially think that you are at a point to where someone may be at risk of lapsing, is that you should ensure that you have a progressive communication strategy. And so what I mean by that is that don't just send them one email. Maybe you send them the first email. Maybe you identify that you have 100 people who gave haven't given in the last 12 months and they just did churn or they just did lapse. So what you would want to do is send all 100 people those emails, say 10 respond and go ahead and give. Great work. You just increased your retention rate. But you want to make sure that you continue to communicate with the other ones. We all know how busy our inboxes get, and if you happen to be using email as your mode of communication, expect that people are going to miss emails or they're going to get buried under many other things that may be as important or not important at all, but that email is a tough thing to keep up with. And so make sure you're continuing to ask, and you don't just ask once. And you may, in many cases, start with email and then move to maybe a letter, and then maybe even a phone call based on your constituent size, the size of your donor database, and the amount that they previously gave. So let's jump into upgrades real quick. So lastly, what is an upgrade? Upgrade to me is one of the more fascinating things that we've really chosen to put some focus on, because it's not something I see people talk about often in the nonprofit space. And so an upgraded donor is just someone who increases their giving from year to year. That's our definition. And so a couple of really interesting stats. One of the ones that stands out to me the most is that middle one. On average, a recurring donor gives 42% more per year than one-time donors. So a great way to increase your or to upgrade your donors is to get them to change to a recurring donor versus a one-time donor. Secondly, it's important to understand that $27 is just the average monthly donation. So if you are doing recurring donors, that only you can't expect that amount to be very large. And so it's a great thing to do with your mid-level donors and below to help them be able to have the donation be a little bit more palatable, but also have them give you a little bit more year over year. So again, a couple key strategies you can consider. Number one, what I'm just referring to, offer donors the option to donate on a recurring basis rather than all at once. And another, I was talking to someone recently on our team, one of our onboarding specialists, Jerry DeLong, and we were discussing a little bit about upgrades and some strategies that you can use. And he pointed out that at the organization he used to work with, they really took the opportunity when they wanted to upgrade someone to do matching gifts, to say if you will, and to put a timeline on that and say if you would like to become a recurring donor and just give $10 a month, we have another donor who's going to match that gift, but it needs to be done by the end of the month. And so those two things are great ways to incentivize people that not only are they given $10, but their donation is going to impact your organization twice as much by someone matching that gift. Secondly, you make sure you're using personalization to remind donors how much they gave last year and make it easy for them to give just a bit more this next year. And so if you're using an email marketing platform like Emma or Constant Contact or MailChimp, you may be aware that there are fields that you can use that are called personalization fields. And so what you could do is upload into someone's record their last donation amount. And then as part of that, you can maybe upload into another field what would be 10% more and show them that, again, you gave $100 last year. We were able to do major things with that. Here's all the things we did. Next year, we want to make a much more significant impact. And to be able to make that impact, all we need is all of our donors just to give us 10% more. Would you be willing to do that? But that, and so would you be willing to give $110 versus $100? Those strategies, it takes a little bit to get some of that stuff set up, but it can be so impactful, and it can really help increase your donations year over year. And then lastly, I would make sure I encourage people, make sure you have a strategy to acknowledge all donors who upgrade. So obviously, for the most part, organizations understand when a major donor gave more this year than last year. But where that sometimes becomes more difficult is when people at the mid-level and below upgrade. And so you really want a way to be able to highlight and understand when someone hits that mark that they gave more, and just make sure you may not even call out that they gave more this year over last year, but you may just want to maybe make a quick phone call and say, hey, I just wanted to thank you so much for continuing to support our organization, and things like that. But where that typically falls apart is it's hard to see that in the mid-level donors due to the fact that so many organizations have so many of them. So really try to find ways to find those people and highlight them. So real quick, I wanted to take just a moment. If you're not already a Kindful customer, I wanted to take just a moment to show you how this information shows up in Kindful. And maybe if you already are a Kindful customer, maybe you'll learn a thing or two here. I'm not going to do a full demo. I'm going to keep it completely focused on the donor lifecycle. So on our dashboard, what you'll see there at the top are contacts, acquisition, retention, and upgrade. So we launched this dashboard about 8 weeks ago, and our big goal was to bring nonprofit organizations more insights that they can take action on. And so what you'll see here is that we have the full contact list. We have acquisition. Now this organization, this is a demo account, and so they've only added 4 new contacts this month, 0 new donors this month. They've got some work to do, and then 82 new donors in the past 12 months. And then when we go on to retention, what you'll see is that their retention rate's 35%. Again, some work to do there to get back up to the industry average. But what is one of the most impactful numbers you can see here is that they last gave, there was 5 people that last gave in June of 2017, 1 year ago. And so what you're able to do is you're able to highlight that number and then immediately click in and see the who behind those numbers. And so this is where you can really start to take action. So with these 5 individuals, thing that stands out to me right off the bat is Olivia Jones. Wow, look at her. She's given $7,385 since she has been a donor with this organization. So we definitely want to make sure we get in touch with Olivia and just continue the relationship with her. Now the other 4, they have all given more at the mid or lower level. And so we may just choose to say with these other 4, we want to send a very targeted message letting them know that we want to continue to have their support. And so you would be able to just select those 4, add them to a group, maybe push them into your email marketing platform, or do a mail merge and print out a letter and send them info. Now, taking it just one more step further, what you might be able to do is add on one more filter. So you can see that now not only am I looking at the people who gave in the last month or gave haven't given in the last year, but that also gave to the building fund. So again, if you have multiple programs, this might be a very great way to make sure you have that really compelling why in the message that you're reaching out, in addition to the fact that they didn't give in the last 12 months. So again, it's time for one more poll, guys. And so we're right after this poll, we're going to jump into questions. The team here has been acquiring a couple questions that we can ask. And so go ahead and start thinking about those questions. But real quick, let's run through this poll. So how soon would you like to add technology to help better track your donors and where they are in the donor life cycle? So 1, we need something yesterday. 2, in the next 3 months. 3, in the next year. Or 4, you're all set. We're not looking to add any new technology right now. So I'm going to launch this poll. Let everybody put in their answers here. There we go. So we'll see how many people are still paying attention. Okay, and we'll give it here just a couple more seconds. Looks like about 50% of people have responded. We'll give it 5 more seconds. So, all right, let's go ahead and close the poll and we'll view the results. So great, so it's about across the board. It's awesome to see that so many people already, I'm assuming if you're not looking for anything, you're all set. But there are a handful of people who, might want to look at something that they can use. So thanks so much for taking that time to fill that out. Now, I'd love to take the time to answer some questions about the life cycle. So if you have a question, we'd love for you to go ahead and submit those again over on the control panel in the questions tab. And I'm going to jump in here and just see if I can answer a couple. So first off, how do you recommend engaging with someone who's donated towards someone's trip? We send people on mission trips and they often donate once. How do you recommend turning them into a donor that gives again? I think this is a great question. And so I think one of the biggest things that you can do is, yes, oftentimes someone has likely given because they know that person, they have a personal relationship with them. But when you're sending, I actually have a great friend of mine who does some amazing mission work in Haiti. And one of the things their organization does so well is that they make sure that people take a lot of photos there. And they make sure that when they come back, they're able to put together, basically a photo collage or a photo book that then they share with everyone who donated to help them understand the impact. And so again, I think probably the biggest thing there is they likely didn't just give because they liked the person. They likely gave also because they believed in what they were doing. And so that might be a little bit of a generalization, and that's a little bit of an assumption. But I think if you can take the time to say, look at the great impact the person you supported did, and we'd love to have your continued support, I think that might work. And maybe you're already doing that, but I think it, again, is just showing the impact. So again, I want to be mindful of everyone's time. We have about 10 minutes left, so I'm going to answer maybe 2 or 3 more questions. So give me 1 second here, and we'll just review a couple to see which one we want to. So can you give more tips for making longtime donors into recurring donors? We only have 2 recurring. Yeah, this might sound really obvious, but I think just making sure you're asking, right? And I know that sounds obvious, but we talk to so many organizations that they ask this very question, and what we ask back is, well, are you asking people actively to become recurring donors? And they'll say, well, it's on our form, it facilitates it. But what we find is that people sometimes just aren't making the ask. I would also say that when you have someone who is at the point of lapsing, again, it might be a great time to say, hey, you gave $100 last year. Would you be up for just giving $10 this year? Maybe if you haven't got a response in 2 or 3 emails, you say, what if you would just give $10 a month instead of $100 all at once? And then what that would do is not only that would help you retain that donor, it actually helps you upgrade them because they're going to give 20% more over the year than just those, than just $100. So my quick tips are just make sure you're asking and make sure you're actually putting some effort into it and that you have a clear path to getting people to do it. And that's one of the things that we see a lot of people aren't doing. So a couple other quick. So how does Kindful specifically help track where donors are at in the life cycle? So again, I just showed the screen there. So we're really showing people more specifically if they have recently become acquired, if you've retained them. But Kindful specifically allows you to segment on many levels. So we have a lot of different ways that you can add fields and maybe even stages where you could then use our reporting functionality to segment and to you can segment on nearly any field. So you can there's a lot of customization you can do based on your individual process. And so we're almost out of time here. I'm going to answer one last question. Sorry, I'm taking just a moment here just to review. We've got a lot coming in, so I'm trying to make sure I answered just a handful, and then we will do our best to follow up with everyone who did have questions. So what are some of the best ways to get donors for a lesser known mission? So I think probably this is where advocate strategies I think can be very, very important, and or crowdfunding or things like that. Crowdfunding oftentimes works great for peer-to-peer organizations and stuff like that. But the constituents you do have that are passionate about your organization, they oftentimes what you'll find is that they are around like-minded people, and they may have, in some cases, even a more compelling way than you've come up with yet to help share to the masses, why they love your mission so much and why it's so important. I think we've seen some great strategies where people have used crowdfunding and peer-to-peer and even just advocate strategies to say, to ask their donors and their constituents to go out and share your mission and help them understand those things. Well, look, everyone, we really appreciate everyone attending. One last slide here. Just if you want to learn more about Kindful, please visit our website at kindful.com. You'll see a free demo request button there. If you fill that out, someone on our team will get back to you right away, and they'll learn a little bit more about your organization, and they will make sure that they take the time to understand what your goals are. And I promise you, one of the things we're most passionate about is making sure that before we take too much of your time is to ensure Kindful could be a good fit. So if you're interested in that, please take the time to do that. Or you can just simply email hi@kindful.com, and same thing. Someone will get right back to you, understand a little bit more about your organization, and will help you get a personalized demo of the tool to see if it could be a good fit for your organization. Last thing I'll mention, it is June, and we are offering something we've actually never done before, and it's a limited time offer where if you would like to join Kindful and use our platform, we'll actually trade you up to the next plan for free. And so if you are thinking about getting a new donor management system, by all means, reach out to us soon, and we can discuss that with you too if you're interested. Thanks so much for everybody taking the time to attend. We really appreciate it. Thanks so much for the questions. And look out for, we're going to continue to offer webinars. Look out for our next one coming up here in a couple weeks. Thanks so much.